As I said, I'm really thrilled about the guests that we're going to have on the program today, the information that we're going to provide. I was in Selma yesterday. It was the most unbelievable experience, but literally tens and tens and tens of thousands of people, all determined to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge as a sign of their deep desire for real change. And our guest in the 4:30 half hour is calling in from Selma, Alabama. She is an auto parts worker who produces seats for the Hyundai Corporation, and they have an incredible story to tell. So please do stay tuned. But we're going to go right ahead with our labor headlines after I tell you that the opinions expressed on this program may not be those of the Board of Directors, staff, or volunteers here at WRFG. So again, it's a busy time for workers and people in struggle all around the world. So here are the labor headlines for March 9th, 2015. The United Nations has issued a report on the global, pardon me, I'm kind of like tongue-tied today, has issued a report on the global gender wage gap to coincide with International Women's Day observed on March 8th. The dismal conclusion of this report is if the rate of improvement continues at the same slow pace, it will take 70 years for women to receive wage equity. I'm going to say that one more time. This report says if the wages for women increase at the pace they are now, it'll take 70 years for women to receive wage equity, which means equal pay for equal work. More than 50 years after the passage of the Equal Pay Act in the U.S., women are paid about 77% of the wages of men, a gain of only 3% in the last 20 years. It took 20 years to get a 3% increase. The International Labor Organization's study also documented an additional motherhood pay gap because of entrenched sexist societal attitudes and government policies that devalue or undervalue women's work and don't provide for maternity leave, child care, and other needs of working women. The report also covered the impact of physical or sexual violence in the home and in the workplace on women workers. I will add that although the report reflects the exploitative and oppressive realities of millions of working women's lives, it did not showcase the tremendous and heroic fight back of women across the globe as they lead campaigns for higher wages and safe working conditions, from Bangladesh, as we learned in this program a few weeks ago, to today's guest in the last half hour, a Hyundai auto parts worker calling in from Selma, Alabama. Now, this morning here in the United States, Governor Scott Walker, despite strong opposition from thousands of workers and business and community members, signed a right-to-work law in Wisconsin. This latest attack on workers' right to organize follows an agenda designed and paid for by some of the wealthiest individuals and corporations in the U.S., such as the Koch brothers. Walker, who is positioning himself as the most conservative candidate in the upcoming presidential primaries, has, as governor of Wisconsin, refused to expand Medicaid, has enacted massive tax cuts for the rich, gutted education, and eliminated collective bargaining rights for most public workers. An interesting note, though, literally at the same time Walker signed the right-to-work legislation, high school and elementary students all across Madison walked out of their classrooms in protest of 19-year-old unarmed Tony Robinson's shooting death at the hands of a Madison policeman this past weekend. They gathered for a march to the state capitol. So it is still going to be a tumultuous struggle in Wisconsin and in Madison over the rights of people. And the Labor Forum is pleased to announce a huge victory in the trial of Boston bus driver leader Stephen Kirschbaum. He had been charged with several felonies for his role in the fight by the unionized school bus drivers against the Veolia Corporation. This is so astounding. After less than 10 minutes at the end of a 3-day trial, which saw the courtroom packed with labor and community supporters, the jury's verdict was not guilty on all charges. Now, you all know if you've ever been in a jury, you go out, you have to go to a room, you're supposed to select a jury person, then you vote on the charges, and then you signal to the person, the guard at the door, that you've reached a decision. All of this took place in less than 10 minutes after this trial. So it was very clear this jury knew from the moment the trial ended that it had been bogus. Steelworkers Local 8751 is one of the most socially conscious and activist unions in the country. Not only has it militantly defended the gains of its contract, it has offered real solidarity with other unions and forged strong ties with parents and teachers fighting education cuts, as well as participating in other struggles against discrimination, war, and poverty. The drivers are currently in negotiations for a new contract, and their number one demand is the rehiring of the 4 leaders fired by Veolia, including Steve Kirschbaum. And lastly, hundreds of Atlanta union members traveled to Selma on buses organized by the Teamsters, UAW, Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, Unite Here, and so many other unions. Church groups, colleges, NAACP and SCLC chapters throughout Georgia came as well by the bus, and countless more came in cars and vans. The march to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge was completed by tens and tens of thousands, and it took hours from mid-morning to late afternoon. It was a momentous turnout and signals the deep desire for real justice and liberation by the masses of African American people and all those impacted by low wages, discrimination, repression, and lack of opportunity. And that concludes our labor headlines for today, and we'll move right into Paul McLennan's This Week in Labor History.
Thanks, Diane. Yesterday was International Women's Day, also called International Working Women's Day, and it's celebrated on March 8th every year. It is an official holiday in many countries and is recognized worldwide. It honors working women and women's struggle everywhere. It is a time to reflect on progress made, to demand change, and to celebrate acts of courage and determination by ordinary women who have played an extraordinary role in the history of their countries and communities. In 1909, the first National Women's Day was observed in the U.S. on the 28th of February. The Socialist Party chose this day in honor of the 1908 garment workers' strike in New York, where 15,000 women demanded better working conditions, the right to vote, and an end to child labor. In 1910, the Socialist International, meeting in Copenhagen, Denmark, established an International Women's Day to honor the movement for women's rights and to build support for achieving a universal right to vote for women. The proposal was greeted with unanimous approval by the conference of over 100 women from 17 countries. In 1913 and 1914, International Women's Day also became a way to protest World War I. As part of the peace movement, Russian women observed their first International Women's Day on the last Sunday in February. Elsewhere in Europe, on or around the 8th of March of the following year, women held rallies either to protest the war or to express solidarity with other activists. In 1975, during International Women's Year, the United Nations gave official sanction to and began sponsoring International Women's Day on March 8th. The Charter of the United Nations, signed in 1945, was the first international agreement to affirm the principle of equality between women and men. The UN theme for International Women's Day 2015 is Empowering Women, Empowering Humanity. Picture it. Governments and activists around the world will commemorate the 20th anniversary year of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, an historic roadmap that sets the agenda for realizing women's rights. According to UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, to be truly transformative, the post-2015 development agenda must prioritize gender equality and women's empowerment. The world will never realize 100% of its goals if 50% of its people cannot realize their full potential. A new UN report says that progress toward women's rights and empowerment is unacceptably slow, and urgent action is required. progress has been particularly slow for women and girls who experience multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination. The report outlines some of the main factors holding back progress, including conflict, economic crisis, volatile food and energy prices, fallout from climate change, and rising extremism and backlash against women's rights. Discriminatory norms remain deeply rooted. Key elements of change encompass transforming norms and stereotypes, transforming economies to achieve gender equality, such as through decent jobs, ensuring women's full and equal participation in all levels of decision-making, significantly boosting investments in gender equality, and strengthening accountability for upholding women's and girls' rights. Women have played an essential role in labor history from the very beginning. Most of the organizing, struggling, as well as succeeding and failing was done by ordinary women who we will never know. These were women who realized the necessity of standing and working together, or they would be destroyed individually. Women who, during the famous 1912 Lawrence textile strike, carried picket signs reading, "We want bread and roses too," symbolizing their demands for not only a living wage, but a decent and human life. We must envision and struggle for a world where each woman and girl can exercise her choices, such as participating in politics, getting an education, having an equal income, and living in societies free from violence and discrimination.
Thank you so much, Paul. And so we've just been joined by our guest in the studio, and we're going to go right into his interview, if that's okay. And we have to adjust this microphone. You might hear a little noise. So with us is Stanley Smalls. Hi, Stanley. We met on the bridge.
Yes.
It was so incredible, folks. I have to tell you, there were literally tens of thousands of people, and then all of a sudden you turn around and whoop, there's somebody you know. So Stanley was one of the participants yesterday at the bridge crossing, the reenactment. But he's here to talk about an important situation with MARTA, and Stanley's been on the program before. And unfortunately, this topic just keeps coming up. And this is about the privatization. MARTA's just scheming again to actually cut over 300 unionized workers and try to subcontract this service, this MARTA mobility, where people with disabilities are able to get a ride to the doctor and where elsewhere, to some private company. So, Stanley, give us the lowdown.
I think you said it all.
Yeah, but you're a driver. Tell me about it.
You're right. It keep coming up. They actually just got approval from the MARTA board to go forward with RFP and put out a proposal on the market for potential managers of the paratransit department. And that's pretty much in a nutshell. We're actually in trouble, and we're to this day asking MARTA to not do it. It's not a good idea. We don't believe that you have addressed nearly none of your concerns as into getting our disabled community adequate transportation, and outsourcing isn't the answer. It's just bandaging the problem or giving the problem to somebody else.
Okay, so if for those of you who read the AJC, you go to the Metro section, and it's the top article in today's paper. And so I want to ask this question because it says that the problem is that MARTA isn't meeting a federal standard of on-time service. And you actually are quoted in this article. So I'm going to ask you this question again. They say that they currently are not meeting the standard of being able to, when a person calls, to be there on time. So what in your opinion is the problem?
The problem is exactly what's in their own study. They put together a study on November 15th when they spoke to random operators, and they asked them a slew of questions as into how to make paratransit a better service. And it came to the conclusion that the problem is clearly poor management. We have management staff that's nowhere near involved into the day-to-day operation. They sit in offices and want to run a service that way. They're just truly not involved, and you can't run an adequate service as paratransit sitting in your office. Or we have a manager who has never driven a paratransit bus in Atlanta. I don't know what she may have done when she worked for Veolia or one of them other private companies, but she has never driven here, so you can't begin to understand anything if you choose not to either get involved no way possible.
All right, so the article says that one of the problems is that the buses that you have to operate to go pick people up with the lifts and all of that are sometimes broken, don't function, and that's why the service time lags.
Exactly. We've had an old fleet of buses that was into the 200,000 mile range, close to 300,000 miles. And these buses have a life expectancy of, I want to say, around 150,000 miles. So when you get all the way up to 250, you're asking for these kind of problems. And I think just MARTA wasn't very proactive when the numbers started climbing up in the 100,000 range to start bringing in new fleets.
And the other problem was related to the programs that they used to schedule with?
Yeah, in the 2015, you're using 8-year-old software. I don't see how can that be any way productive. We have 3 buses going to the same location. We actually have 3 buses at one place picking up 3 different people going in the same direction. And when you say something about it, it's just like, we'll look into it. It's nothing to look into if I'm actually telling you the issue is actually happening right now. Let's correct it on site, put the 2 people on one bus and let's move. And if somebody else needs help somewhere else, let's direct them 2 buses there. We just have a bunch of staff who don't have a clue and they're not held to high standards.
So again, anybody who listens to this program knows that we have talked about the problems of privatization of public services over and over and over again. So it strikes me that some of these business types who have control of MARTA are thinking that by privatizing, in other words, by having workers who get less wages and benefits than you do, that somehow that is going to solve this problem. And then my understanding is MARTA tried this once time before.
Yes, they have tried it before, and it fell horribly from my understanding. I'm actually working with some of the drivers now that actually was a part of that ordeal that was brought back in-house from Dave's, I think it was Dave's Transportation. And some of the problems that MARTA, if they do go forward with outsourcing, will face. Late buses. This is we all know what the private sector is about. It's about profit, and they're not about quality. They're about I need to make my bottom line.
So obviously, one of the situations that we think about this is if you subcontract a service to a company that has to make profit, the only way they can do it is either they themselves will have crappy buses, because they also will, maybe they'll buy used ones, I don't know. They will have low-wage workers, and then there's going to be turnover, because people are not going to be able to make it on the kind of money that this company is going to pay. And who really gets it in the neck here is people with disabilities who absolutely rely on this service. Could you talk a little bit about the people that you come in contact with, because you're a mobility driver?
They're wonderful people. They're very wonderful people, and I think besides protecting my job and the people I work with, I forged a family with them. So it's like when you tell me that you're going forward with outsourcing, or your intent is to go forward with outsourcing, I take offense that you're about to harm one of my family members. And let's wait, let's stop, let's back up, let's think, let's look at the problem. The same thing I said to the MARTA board, and Brother Paul was there, is nobody ever asked the public, nobody ever asked the driver. It's just management saying this is what's best. How do you know what's best if you don't ask the people that's affected by it? They're saying that they're not being able to meet the standards by the FTA, and clearly the passengers have been complaining. So at what point do you say, well, how do we resolve your issue? Not how do we sweep it under the carpet and make sure your bus is on time. Just make sure your bus, we don't have to hear from you no more. But overall, there has been no motivation, no pride into fixing the problem. It's just more so now, let's just sweep the issue under the table, and we don't really care about the disabled community, but unfortunately, well, fortunately, you have a bunch of drivers who do, and we truly don't agree with it.
Okay, we just have like 1 minute left before, because our auto parts worker from Selma, Alabama is on the line, and we want to get to her too. So Stanley, if there's someone out here in the listening public that is also offended by this idea that MARTA keeps pushing about privatizing and taking away the drivers that disabled people know and trust, and put a whole bunch of other people in their place, how can people out here listening help?
Well, you can contact me via email, spsmalls@atu732.org, and you can request any type of literature as into how can you help.
And also, Disability Link is hosting a meeting next Tuesday, March 17th at 5:30 at their office at 1901 Montreal Road, Suite 102 in Tucker. And the purpose of this meeting, which is hosted by Disability Link and also by Concerned Transit Riders for Equal Access, is to discuss a strategy for how to fight this privatization.
Thank you so much, Stanley, for coming in. It was cool again seeing you on the bridge.
Always.
All right, Chris, do we have an announcement that we have to do? We do. So Kim, stay on the line. We'll be right with you. We're back. You are tuned into the Labor Forum here on WRFG 89.3 FM. I'll remind you that this is our first program of the Spring Pledge Drive, and we do encourage all of our listeners, all our supporters, all those who are interested in worker justice to contribute to the program and to the station. So, Kim, I'm so excited you're on the line. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, great. I want to let you know who you're talking with. There are three of us here in the studio who are so interested in hearing the story of the Hyundai parts workers in Selma, Alabama. So who you're going to be talking with directly, and then of course to the thousands of people out in Radio Land, is Paul McLennan, and he's a retired ATU member. We have Stanley Smalls, who's a current driver for the MARTA buses here in the city. He specializes in driving the buses that take the disability buses. They're called MARTA Mobility. And then me, retired auto worker, Diane Mathewitz. So, listeners, this is so important, this program and this interview, because there were tens of thousands of people in Selma over the last several days. And it was to commemorate 50 years that have gone by since this really historic struggle that was launched by the people of Selma, Alabama, with the assistance of others, Dr. King, the SNCC people, others, that endured unbelievable repression, including the murder of Jimmy Lee Jackson, the beating and tear gassing and trampling of ordinary folks in Selma, Alabama, who just wanted the right to vote. So tens of thousands of people were there yesterday and in preceding days to sort of say this struggle is not over. And among the people who were there yesterday were a group of workers who live in Selma, but who work for a plant that produces the seats for the Hyundai Corporation. And their story is what says that the struggle in Selma is continuing now. So Kim, can you just tell our listeners just what is going on with where you work, what the situation is of your co-workers and yourself?
This plant has been around for 10 years, and we have been faced with health and safety issues, low wages that look like they benefit fast food people. And we have had chemical leaks, a wage lawsuit, and it's been a struggle. We work the foam seats that we make is made out of a chemical called isocyanate TDI, and it causes asthma, respiratory problems, sinus problems, and it even might cause cancer.
So I understand from the Facebook and from my own conversation with you and others that you yourself are a person that is really fighting the results of having worked at this plant where they don't provide enough safety equipment, and essentially you all are exposed to this. Could you talk about your own personal situation, how long you've worked there, how much you make, and what you're suffering from?
It'll be 10 years for me in May, and I make $12.25 an hour, and the 25 cents is for shift premium difference. And
So you work at night.
I work at night, and that's the top out pay.
So nobody makes more than you do, $12.25.
There's probably the maintenance and lab tech and the team.
Right, but the production workers.
But production workers make $12 an hour.
Okay. So talk about yourself in terms of what working there has meant in terms of your own health.
Working there, my doctor has diagnosed me with irreversible airway obstruction, and I also have asthma.
Asthma that you didn't have before.
That I didn't have before. I never smoked, and when I came in there, I never had asthma. I was perfectly fine before I came to the clinic.
All right, so you mentioned, and I've read as well, that in 2008, workers there filed a lawsuit over wage theft. So it strikes me that you have just every issue of importance to workers. One, you're low paid. Nobody can really live on $12 an hour or less, and I understand many workers make less. Nobody should be working in such unsafe working conditions. And then on top of it all, the company stole your overtime money.
Yes.
Were you part of that lawsuit too?
Yes, I was. It took us almost 7 years to get that money.
The wheels of justice don't just roll slow, they hardly roll at all for working people. I know that you were involved in so many things over these last couple of days in Selma, and that the workers at your plant. Oh, let's go back to some other issues before I do that. Okay, so I don't know if I'm going to say this right. The company is called Renosol Seating. Is that the way it's pronounced?
It was called Renosol Seating. Yes, about not too long ago they changed the name to Lear Selma.
Lear Selma?
Yes.
And then so this is owned by the Lear Corporation, correct?
Lear Corporation, or Fortune 500 company.
Okay, and then the only company that these seats are sold to is Hyundai.
Hyundai in Montgomery.
All right, so can you talk a little bit about the letter that you tried to deliver to the Hyundai people and why you chose to go to their corporate headquarters?
We did a delegation Thursday to Hyundai, and it was to send a letter to their president asking them to hold Lear accountable for what they're doing to us. And we were met at the gate, and the guard wouldn't let us in and wouldn't give our letter to anyone, and they called the police on us and they kicked us out. And the reason we did this is we wanted Hyundai, because they're their main supplier, to hold them accountable for what they're doing to us.
All right, so does Hyundai have a sort of code that they, say they have about their suppliers, about wages and working conditions? I mean, is there something that they put out there that says that?
They do have a code or a policy, but I don't have that in front of me, so I cannot directly tell you what that policy states. But it's a policy that they go by, that they need to go by. It's a certain guideline they need to go by.
Let me ask you another question. As I was driving in on 80 yesterday towards Selma, I saw a couple of other plants that I think also might produce for Hyundai. So is this seat plant the only one, or are there other workers in the Selma area that also make parts for Hyundai?
there are other plants that make car parts for Hyundai. Yes.
And is your understanding that their wages and conditions are comparable to yours or similar?
I believe ours is the lowest.
Oh.
They might make a little bit more than we do, but I believe ours is the lowest.
I have a question about the chemical. How are people exposed to it? Is it something in the air, or is it something you are exposed to on your skin, or how does that exposure work?
That it exposed both ways, either through the air or by touching. And by touching, it absorbs in the skin. And when you touch the foam, you absorb it through your skin.
Mm-hmm. So is the problem in terms of safety related to ventilation and some kind of hand protection? What exactly needs to happen to make the plant safe?
Okay, the plant, OSHA has been into the plant. And OSHA has fined them for not properly putting us in proper hand protection, and it's poor ventilation in the plant too. It's a poor ventilation system in the plant. So they got issues. We have, as I said, we have issues in this plant.
So I was explaining that early in my career as a worker for General Motors, this is when literally all of these parts that are now subcontracted out to smaller producers who pay low wages, no benefits, that used to all be produced what we call in-house. So at one point, when I was working at the Lakewood Assembly Plant here in Atlanta, I was in what's called the cushion department. And I worked on seats, putting the upholstery on them with these big staple guns. And so I have a little familiarity with the odor. You know, foam, when there's tons of these foam cushions around, there is a smell. An odor that has, I guess, emanates from the chemicals that make the foam. But we had to wear gloves, and we had, there were certain things, and this is years ago.
Okay, but we've been there 10 years, and just last year they just put us in gloves to deal with these gloves, to deal with this foam, to touch this foam. We just got put in gloves last year.
Mrs. Stanley.
I have a quick question, and I simply do sympathize with what you're going through. Have you ever thought about taking it, getting the public involved, bringing public awareness to the situation?
That's why we went to Hyundai.
No,
and,
not.
Pardon me?
No, go ahead. I'm listening.
Go ahead. You said no, not that. That's
Not-
why we went to Hyundai. Okay, go ahead.
Well, they had press and all that, so that was part of your public campaign, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was,
Do y'all continue with it? Like, I understand you said they called the police to remove y'all off the property.
Yeah.
Did y'all keep going forward?
We'll continue to go forward. One of my co-workers spoke at Brown Chapter Friday and asked them to call a number at Hyundai and ask Hyundai to hold Lear accountable for what they're doing to us.
So you have support in the community in Selma around the plant. Do people live close to where they work?
But yes, but the support, you know how you in a system where they are afraid and look like they scared they're gonna lose their job, and they scared to draw attention to themselves.
I know your feeling.
So it seems to me, again, one of these situations in all of the, all the coverage there has been of Selma, the 50th anniversary. One of the things that also has been clearly mentioned is that in these last 50 years, a lot of manufacturing, a lot of jobs have fled Selma. And that now the population of Selma, 40%, according to what I read in the newspapers, is considered below the poverty line. And I would believe that at $12 an hour, anybody at your plant who has any children or as a family is one of those people that are below the poverty line, because you would not make, is it 23,000 something? Something like that, for a family of 4. As I was there, and I'm sure everybody who was there noticed the number of abandoned and very dilapidated housing, and that the population has switched. And so even though the people of Selma, through their heroism, truly made a national change with the Voting Rights Act, nevertheless, for the vast majority of people in Selma, that progress of economic progress has pretty much not happened. So that's why I thought that hashtag Selma is now, and that it's everywhere, that the struggle is still ongoing. This is not something you look back at and go, you know, hooray for them. It's hooray for you.
Yeah, and in a small town where you're getting $12 an hour, some of them will think that they got a good job, and if that's the only job, they want to keep their job. And so when you start to talk about the company is not doing us right, you kind of messing with somebody's income of living, and they don't want you to mess with that. They happy with that devil that they have got, and they don't want to try another devil.
So all 3 of us are union members. And so we absolutely know how important it is, though, for you and the other people who, if people go to your Facebook, I want you to talk about that, because there's a lot of information there. And so, you know, the faces of workers are there. You actually have a good group of people around you who have decided that, you know, this fear tactic, you know, the people who faced off those troopers on the bridge, I don't know how much more fear there could be. When I was crossing that bridge, I thought about that, how high up I was from the water, you know, if a horse had come trampling towards us. So I'm wondering whether, this is a question that there's no real answer to, but I'm wondering if you have gotten a sense, and this crowd of people has just left Selma, and the march, there's actually another march that's marching to Montgomery, a reenactment of that. Do you feel that this huge celebration of what took place 50 years ago has had any encouraging kind of response among people in Selma who for the last 50 years have continued to be very downtrodden?
With this celebration, it makes you think about, makes you appreciate what they did back then. And this 50 years now makes you want to continue on the struggle. We still got work to do.
So when I looked at your Facebook, I saw that parts workers in other parts of the country, Mississippi, I can't remember all the states, are also organizing around similar issues. So it seems to me, you know, on this program, the Labor Forum, we talk a lot about how big corporations, whether it's a public entity like MARTA or General Motors or whoever, has seized upon taking good paying jobs and subcontracting those jobs out to an entity that's going to pay way less with no benefits, and how that has essentially just dropped down the standard of living for workers here in the United States. So that's why it's so exciting that low-wage workers are really the lead in fighting back against all of this.
And then when they subcontract those jobs out, the biggest of the workers are temps that don't have benefits.
Could you say a little bit about the plant, how many people work there, and what the age is, and is it mostly women? How does that break down?
There's say probably less than 100 people work at the plant, and mostly women. The age group varies.
And what are you doing personally for your asthma? Do you have to have any regular treatment for that?
Yes, I do. Every day. Every day, inhalers, nasal spray. Sometimes when it gets so bad, I might have to take steroids.
And what kind of health care do you have from the company? Does it pay for any of that?
I pay for it. No.
Yes, we didn't ask you that. I mean, we assumed that because it was such a low-wage plant that it doesn't offer does it offer vacation, pensions, sick leave?
No sick leave, vacation, paid holidays. 401 if you want to get into it.
Well, it's hard to have any money to put in a 401 when you can barely make it. So one of the other things I noticed, of course, was that the other plants I saw were out on the road, the Highway 80 between Selma and Montgomery, and they were then off the road, kind of back. And I thought to myself, to get this job, you have to have a car, you have to maintain a car, you have to pay insurance. I sort of thought that at the end of the day, and pay for gas, that at the end of the day, this low wage, that you have to spend so much money to just get this low wage, just to go to the job, because you obviously, there's not a public transportation system that takes people to these plants.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Gotta have a vehicle. Insurance. Gas. And gas is pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your next steps in terms of organizing? What do you plan to do?
We're going to continue to fight. We had to not put off, but we had got a date for to have a vote to have form a union, but it had to be postponed.
Oh, so you all have been signing union cards too?
Oh, we have signed union cards, but we had to put out, we had even got a date to do a vote. But because of so much of harassment, illegal doing, so we had to put it off for file charge.
Okay, so again, for our listeners who may not understand this process, the National Labor Relations Board oversees these elections.
Correct.
Right, union elections. And how it's done is that workers at a workplace are required, you have to have a card signed by a certain percentage of the workers at a workplace. And then as actually Kim is saying, then a date gets set. And usually what happens then is that the company knows who these workers are and starts having personal meetings and all kinds of stuff. So could you describe a little bit what you talk about this harassment?
Hold on, let me call it. They do union buster stuff, as they call it, to intimidate you so that you won't vote yes for a union. They don't want you to have a union. They will either march you into the office. What they say is that the plant is going to close. The company will not accept your material. They don't want to be bothered. They don't want to be bothered with anybody associated with a union. They do so much to harass until they just put fear into people's heart and they scare them and make them don't want to form a union, don't want to have a union. But a union is a way for us to have our voices heard.
Exactly.
We're going to say a big hallelujah, amen. You have all three of us nodding to that. Because, again, listeners, and all of you who are working at, I don't care where it is, whether it's a fast food place, whether you're hotel worker, whether you're wherever you are, a small plant, just the way Kim is, and you are experiencing everything from, your hours getting changed, your no schedule, low pay, you think you're getting cheated out of your money, no health care, no pension, no nothing, disrespect on the job, harassment, sexual harassment, racist harassment, all kinds. It's really, really true that a union contract makes it where you have a chance to have some decency on your workplace, where you are, really the majority of your life is working somewhere. And at least you should be able to have decent wages and respect when you're spending your whole life just about doing it. So Kim, I want to just give you one chance here. We're almost at the end of our program. I want to thank you so much for calling in, because I know you're going to work, and I know you had an exhausting several days, because as you all were at all the events for the 50th anniversary. I mentioned that I saw this on Facebook. Do you want to give your contact information, how people can go and see your face and see what you all are doing?
We have a Facebook page, and it says, "Who really makes your car?"
Okay,
And
so
on
that's,
Facebook,
we'll say that one more time. It's who really makes your car.
who really made
Made your car.
Made your car.
And I know for myself, when you go on there, you're going to see Kim's picture and many other workers. You're going to read about you're going to see the letter that they tried to deliver to Hyundai. This is a lot of information.
And there's a video on there that we did. Me and another coworker got suspended. It might be on there. Me and another coworker got suspended for 3 days, and the other guy, they gave him a warning
What, for making a video?
for making a video
All right, folks.
about health and safety, about our struggle.
All right. I want to really encourage everybody to pay attention to this struggle of these workers in Selma, Alabama. Certainly you can go on to their Facebook page and like it, and then get information for them. Kim, I want to thank you so much, because I know you had to be super tired after all of the things you were engaged in over the last several days, and that you have to go to work. So thank you very much from the Labor Forum, all of us here in WRFG.
Thank you,
so
Kim.
much for having. Thank you all for having us.
You're welcome. Okay, listeners, we're about to the end of the program, and I just want to say, if this interview and the interview earlier with Stanley Smalls is something that you recognize that really this is the only program, the only radio station where you're going to hear the voices of people who are the ones making a difference here for workers, not just in Atlanta but across the country, then please, please, please do make your contribution of whatever amount. I certainly hope it's a sizable one, though, to WRFG and to the Labor Forum. And you can do that by going online at WRFG.org, calling in anytime to any program, and pledging on air, and that's 404-523-8989, or coming by the studio at 1083 Austin Avenue Northeast, and that's in Atlanta, 30307. We really hope you will do that as a sign of your appreciation of the work, not just of the people who are here on the program, Ozzy who videos, and so you can see it on YouTube, Chris who does the engineering of the board, but all of us here at the station. We're all volunteers. We're all workers. So please do support us. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for Democracy Now!, and after that, Just Peace and Revolutionary African Perspectives. Bye-bye.